In the 2010s, an ape known as Caesar, played by the great Andy Serkis, captivated the hearts and minds of moviegoers in his struggle for freedom. The Caesar trilogy is a reboot of the Planet of the Apes franchise, with the first film having its debut as far back as 1968. The most recent and 10th film in the franchise, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, takes place 300 years after the events of the Caesar trilogy and delineates the coming-of-age story of the young ape Noah in a now ape-dominated world. Welcome to Studio Cinema Saturday, the show where we review films old and new, the ones you don't like and the ones you do. I'm your host, Kel McCall. To my right sits Dalton Sherrill, and to my left, Jackson Ham, and we are thrilled to be here reviewing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Directed by Wes Ball, this film stars Freya Allen as May/Nova, Kevin Durand as Proximus Caesar, Owen Teague as Noah, Peter Macon as Raka, Lydia Peckham as Suna, and Travis Jeffrey as Anaya.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and start with some spoiler-free thoughts on the film. I'll go ahead and start. I will say, I like this movie, as in I thought it was entertaining, really enjoyed the intro to the film, but it's ultimately the pace and, this entire jumbled story that's kind of representing bits of the original 1968 film that I'm not as crazy about. So I'll let you guys go ahead and give your thoughts before I get too far into that.
I'll just be honest, I don't think this movie really had to happen. I was satisfied with the conclusion of the war for the Planet of the Apes. I like where we ended off the trilogy. I like the intro to this film. I think it's nice kind of just, closing off Caesar's story. But this movie didn't have to happen necessarily. I enjoyed the film. I thought the plot was interesting enough, but I don't think it really did anything revolutionary to justify another film for this franchise.
I can't help but agree with the both of you. I gotta say, it's kind of just a fourth movie that didn't really need to happen. Overall, to me, I feel like enjoyment of this movie in the future could very much hinge on if sequels really build off of this first one well enough. And I don't think that's a good start for a new trilogy.
Yeah, and I will say, we talk about sequels. This is a franchise that shouldn't be trying to hook me into its next big sequel, because I should just already enjoy the other 12 movies that are out. Once this next movie comes out, there are going to be 12 other movies to look back on, and it's one of those things where I'm now starting to lose interest. I haven't seen all of the original films, but we've seen the Caesar trilogy, we've seen Kingdom, and it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I don't know how excited I am for too much more.
Very much so. I know behind the scenes just this past week I saw on social media, whether that be true or not, that they're looking to make this quote-unquote a saga of 9 movies total. The original Caesar trilogy, these next 3, including Kingdom, and 3 more after that. And, given my thoughts on Kingdom, I'm like, okay.
What I think was interesting about the start of the Caesar trilogy was that we had modern day, contemporary society. Everything was normal, and then we descend into this worldwide pandemic where everybody has this virus, and we have these intelligent apes, and they kind of take over, and then they find refuge in a forest. I thought that was an interesting enough plot, because all of the other previous movies are essentially just rehashing the old film or just taking that narrative further, and it just kind of seems like we're going back to what we did originally for a storyline that really didn't even need it. And not only that, I think the fact that Noah looks like Caesar is, I think that speaks volumes, because I think Caesar was just the heart of that original trilogy, and I kind of just wanted to see what happened with him and his story and its conclusion. I think they're just kind of banking on that a little bit for this film.
Interesting that you mentioned that Noah looks like Caesar, because I believe when this movie was first coming out, a lot of people saw a trailer. Maybe they're thinking it's his infant son that lived through the original trilogy. And I think a lot of people, rightfully so, thought that it would pick up with, Caesar's direct descendant. But it doesn't, which is I think it's an interesting choice that could have been done maybe better, but it's not a choice that I have a strong opinion on, personally.
That, or I'll say it could have been Caesar's, if they still want to do 300 years into the future, that could have been Caesar's descendant. Caesar would have been ancestor to our main character had we followed that route. So It is interesting that they have tried to flip it back into more of the original roots. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off into a spoiler warning. We're going to go ahead and talk about the movie. I'm about to actually draw some references to the original Planet of the Apes 1968, which I just recorded a first time watching on, so I'm pretty fresh on some of this stuff, and it was actually very enjoyable to go into this movie with the original fresh on my mind, because one of the interesting concepts about Rise of the Planet of the Apes and the Caesar trilogy that started is it kind of flips the concept of the original film. The original film, a talking human comes across a civilization of talking apes. In Rise of the Planet of the Apes, we see the talking apes kind of rise in the planet of the humans. So it's a little bit of a flip, and in this movie, Kingdom, we get to see that same kind of dynamic from the original movie where a talking human rolls upon a civilization of intellectual apes, and they're then to navigate that themselves. I have a couple of, comparisons that I've drawn to the film. One of the first scenes that kind of grabbed my eye and made me think about the original was where the tribe of humans are all running from the apes on horseback. This is directly adapted from the original film, but in the original film, the apes have assault rifles, and it makes it way cooler. And, this is kind of something that I'm kind of thrown on, because when we last left these apes in War of the Planet of the Apes, they had assault rifles. And so I knew there was either a lack of resources or a lack of development in these apes from Kingdom that we do get in the original series of films. So this is weird that they've taken it in that direction. I feel like I expected these apes to be furthered along just a little bit. A couple other quick things that I have. May is literally called Nova throughout Acts 1 and most of 2. This is the character's name from the original film, and I will say I probably like the way they handle May in this film more than Nova from the original, because I think the way they handle Nova is very outdated in the original film, while in this film your female actually gets to speak, which is nice. The mommy doll scene at the end. This is a scene in the original film that holds all the weight in the world. This essentially tells us that we are on Earth. It tells us there was a human civilization that talked and came from Taylor's origin in the film. And in this, it's literally a doll that they pick up that has no significance whatsoever. It's these small moments in Kingdom that show me the other four films that I've seen, being 1968 and the Caesar trilogy, are just so much better. They're well made. The music track is from Kingdom's very heavily inspired by the original. And then the climax of the film, a couple of apes team up with the human to, in this case of Kingdom, destroy their little civilization. In the original film, it is more to debunk or disprove what's going on in the film. So you get these similar climaxes, and I gotta say, I do prefer the original film over Kingdom. But to get into some topics, let's go ahead and start with the intro, Caesar's funeral.
For me, the intro really drug me right into it. I was like, okay, this is what I'm looking for out of the intro of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Caesar's funeral, you get this awesome opening text that kind of recaps the events of the past three movies with this awesome just hold on these final words before it goes into his funeral. His name was Caesar. And I really like that, and it's to great effect. And then the apes all holding up the Apes Together Strong as they, have a funeral pyre for Caesar.
Loved that.
With the title fading in. Really strong intro, followed by the rest of the movie.
I have to say, maybe the film would be more entertaining to people who haven't seen the Caesar trilogy. You get that little recap, and this is a new, interesting take on the storyline. You have these new apes, and you're kind of following this coming-of-age story. But since I've seen everything that Caesar and the other apes have gone through, and I'm not with those apes anymore, the characters that I've become attached to, I care a little bit less. I'm removed from it.
I agree, and I'll even say that, like, I feel like I would have enjoyed this had I not seen the original movie, too. So it's like, had we not seen anything that come before this, maybe this is a little bit stronger, but because what we have gotten before was so good, this feels like the weak link.
It feels like they're just sort of reusing some of the same dynamics as well. Immediately after watching the film, I talked about how Maurice and Caesar had this really cool dynamic in the original films, and they try to do a similar thing with Noah and Raka. And I think it does work, but at the same time, it's just a sort of just recycling of these plot elements, and it's not that interesting. It's
does
nothing new.
work, it just feels cheap. Let's go ahead and talk about the pace and the story structure here. When you're sitting in the theater watching this, I was checking the time, man.
It's one of those movies where it did feel a little long in some parts. Not necessarily because it is a long movie, just because what's happening on screen sometimes doesn't feel as important or epic as it probably needs to be. You know, there's some moments where you're just kind of like, we're meandering a little here.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm cool with some of the stuff that drags us along, like the traveling, and I get we have places to go. We're traveling by horseback. This jungle is huge. It is kind of nice to get these like exposition shots of them traveling. They are really pretty. But it's just some of the like substance that we're getting in some of these scenes that are no good. Like, I think about how we don't meet Proximus Caesar until exactly halfway through the film. And once we meet him, the side characters that accompany Noah become really insignificant to the plot. So it's this balance issue where none of the side characters are balanced whatsoever, and you end up really not caring about any of them, minus Noah, who I did like. And Raka, who had an amazing story throughout the film, but it was recycled.
The main villain of the film does only come in halfway through. Before that, you just kind of see his like goons going out there and capturing other ape tribes. But that period of the film where he's kind of traveling to Proximus's kingdom is a bit odd, where he meets Raka and May. During that whole time, his friends are gone, his ape tribe is captured, he's going to go free them. Then that kind of abruptly stops when they get caught on that bridge by the, Proximus guys. Raka presumably dies, and all of a sudden we're back with the tribe, and they're captured. It's just a bit of an odd way to delay the capture, because usually in this kind of story, your hero character doesn't get captured to return to his friends. He goes and frees them. It's just, I don't know, a neat way to kind of not do the entire trope.
The first act was really slow. I think we spend, and I get just because we're starting off 300 years removed from the Caesar trilogy, we have to, introduce the audience to these characters, and we spend a lot of time in the Ewok village equivalent, for the apes, and we're trying to get these eggs because they also, was it hawks that they trained, or eagles?
Eagles.
Yeah.
They're Eagle Clan.
And in the first act, they spend a lot of time on that, and it makes sense whenever we get to the end of the film, but again, I just wasn't super into it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we do get to the end of the film, and earlier we had kind of learned that this eagle power is not one that Noah is to really possess. He talks about how he can't do it and also doesn't want to because it was his dad's job, and then at the end he kind of steps up into what might be his dad's old position. He's going to be the elder of their clan. Then he's just able to use the eagles with such OP power, and it just kind of kicks Proximus Caesar, this led to be big bad. I mean, you walk into AMC to watch the movie and there's a giant cardboard cutout of the man. This overpowered eagle attack just takes him down, and it's kind of one of the most anticlimactic moments of the film for me.
I much would have preferred them leaving a kind of maybe he drowned, and then maybe Proximus can come back with his kingdom for like a vengeance in a second movie, than the eagle death, But I think you're about to kind of contest what he's saying.
I was just going to say, I thought it was going to be similar to what happened in the other 3 movies where it was Caesar and Koba fighting for this, power struggle and who was going to be in charge of the other apes. I thought we were going to have something similar to that. But they make Proximus so much bigger than Noah, then this is it's not even really a possibility, so you kind of had to set up the eagle story in the beginning for them to even be able to defeat him at the end, unless they were all going to band together and turn on him, which they were kind of too scared to do.
I was just about to talk about that too. I would have liked to maybe seen that these apes have Noah's back, but none of them. I mean, they're just scared apes.
They chanted. They did sing the song, which was cool. So I guess they were just sort of serving up the kill for Noah, but at the same time, I think they should have helped.
Something I found a little bit odd about the story personally is after they defeat Proximus, Noah's ape tribe kind of just leaves, whereas Proximus had a bunch of other ape tribes kind of enslaved. Which is very odd how they just don't address what happens after that.
No resolution.
Dude, there is no resolution to this movie. They beat Proximus Caesar, and the movie was so damn long they had no more screen time to write an ending. It's how it almost feels.
I was saying after watching it, in context of the universe that's been established, basically nothing has changed. There are still intelligent apes. We think that the humans are gone. Plot twist, no, they're holed up in a bunker at the end of the film and they get their satellites turned back on. What's changed?
I feel like we're right back to the end of Dawn, where we're about to go right back into a ape-human war again. But we'll talk more about some theories on the end at the end of the video. Let's go ahead and move on to some highlights, favorite moments, unfavored moments. So I'm going to talk about one of my favorite moments in the film is when they are fighting off the goons of Proximus Caesar, and we get to Raka's death. And he just kind of tells Noah, he doesn't tell him ape strong together, he doesn't tell him human strong together, he tells him strong together, as in the world, everybody, civilization, strong together.
Humans and apes.
Yeah, and just kind of, I think Raka, who was in the Order of Caesar, the last surviving member, which was super cool, is just this final character to push on Caesar's message, and now it's going to live through Noah, and that is one thing I really like in the film.
I liked the concept of there being this sort of faux Caesar who really didn't stand for any of the principles that the original character did. And if you're going to have Noah fill, the original Caesar's shoes and then have him look like him as well, I think that's part of his story, and I enjoyed that. He embodies, apes strong together, or just strong together, that Raka teaches him, and he's able to save his tribe, and I did like that. I thought it was a cool coming-of-age story.
Something I really liked and thought was done well with the movie was the setting itself. With jumping 300 years, they did a really good job mastering the setting of just the world has been reclaimed by nature. Yeah. Proximus's base is like a grounded ship, and just where Noah lives is a bunch of old skyscrapers that just have trees and foliage growing through them, and where we find Raka is like LAX airport, if you look in the background, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I'll say this about the setting too, that it kind of skipped. Extremely similar to the setting that we're in 1968, Planet of the Apes, and the films end in extremely similar locations, which was super cool. But I'm going to talk about one of my non-favorite moments. This is something about the film I do not like, and that is that Proximus Caesar should have been so much cooler. We should have almost cared about this man in a Gus Fring Breaking Bad type of way. As in, oh man, he's mean, he's evil, but I kind of love watching him on screen. Negan type character. That's what Proximus Caesar. He's the foil to Caesar, who we loved so much, but we don't meet him till halfway through the movie. And I'll say, I think there are some details to his character that they kind of skimped on. And it goes into, he's had a human reading him Roman history. To see a scene of getting any of that, maybe seeing Proximus's interpretation of some of this. You know, he kind of uses Caesar's words, but then his actions show that he has no clue what those words even mean. So it's kind of one of those things where I maybe would have liked to see his character fleshed out, and they actually give us a fleshed out full character, not just a bad guy.
I gotta agree. Proximus Caesar very much is just a bad guy, an antagonist for the sake of a story.
Stands for
his
nothing.
goal? What is his goal? Open the bunker. Other than that, his other kind of interesting aspect is just spouting Caesar's words in a wrong way, and that doesn't make a character interesting on its own. What's the psychology of him? What's his deeper machinations? You know, why does he go out and capture all these tribes besides slave labor? Because it's very simple the way it is now. You telling me those words, apes strong together, don't mean anything more to him besides, I'm going to go take them and we're going to, use them as slaves to open this bunker that I want weapons from.
His goal was to further ape evolution, which here is my issue with the apes in this film, the evolution of apes in this film. One of the cool things about Caesar was that he was learning from the humans, but he was also learning on his own when they were out in the forest, trying to develop their civilization. Yet Proximus Caesar is just trying to learn from the humans. He's learning from old human technology, trying to learn from an old human bunker. Like, he's not furthering the ape civilization whatsoever.
And I think that's an interesting point, because technologically the apes haven't advanced at all.
No.
If anything, they've regressed because they have, primitive-esque weapons, except for, Proximus forces. They have slightly advanced primitive weapons.
The stun sticks.
Stun staffs, yeah.
And other than that, they have evolved beyond Caesar's time mentally.
Their language capabilities
Yes.
are a lot stronger.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's speaking in full sentences now. Which
cognitive, everything, working great. They ride horses better than ever now. But, other than that.
And maybe that's just a, reality thing. Maybe, the original Planet of the Apes then becoming this super advanced kind of utopia, surpassing the human sort of thing, that's a little bit unrealistic, because evolution is something that takes place over thousands of years, not hundreds. I will say it's kind of silly, though, that they're not using guns, or at least trying to find guns. And
What do you guys make of the bunker of tanks and guns and its significance to the plot?
To me, it's just like, that is realistic that there would be like some sort of secret military or scientific even bunker they have there.
These weapons aren't just disappearing during times like this.
it ends up being a MacGuffin that moves the plot forward, just because we don't use anything that's inside the bunker. We use it to get his tribe out of there, but essentially that's it.
Yeah.
There was a conversation that did shed a little bit of light on Proximus Caesar's motivations. Essentially, he was saying, during the time of Caesar, apes were imprisoned, and we don't want to go back to living in cages. So there was maybe a little bit more motivation there, but again, at the end of the day,
At the end of the day, he was also throwing apes in cages.
Like you said, the bunker being the MacGuffin kind of takes us to the end of the plot. Once they get in there, they don't use any of the stuff. It becomes a conflict between the characters in the film, not the things around them. And we get to the ending where Nova, I called her Nova, May ends up making it back to the people.
Yeah, with the SATCOM.
Which I'll backtrack. It did serve one purpose. She did get that chip from the ship.
Right, she gets the chip, she makes it to where she needs to go. They're able to kind of turn their power back on and communicate with other locations. They find people in Indiana that they're able to talk to. And so then we get Noah, who goes back home, and he looks through that telescope again, and when they're searching through the bunker, he sees the solar system kind of pinned up in one little spot, and you're only led to believe that maybe that's what he's been looking at through the telescope this entire time, but we never get to see what he sees.
We never see it, but he goes earlier in the film and looks through it and is amazed by what he sees. And then at the end of the film, of course, he takes his mate chimp, girlfriend chimp?
Suna?
I don't know, Suna. He takes Suna to it to show her. and we don't see it again. We only see like a reflection in the eye, and I only have ideas of what it could be, but nothing concrete.
And I just thought this too. I think the Caesar trilogy sort of tackled, initially he's thinking that apes are better than humans, and then after dealing with Koba, he realizes that, oh, we aren't so different. Maybe that just serves to show that, like, oh, they're both fascinated by space, essentially. Like, the humans and the apes, they aren't so different. Look, they're both kind of doing these similar things at the end of the film.
Yeah, and I agree with you as well. And, you know, that take that you just gave, I would say it doesn't warrant a sequel.
No.
You know, they don't need to go explore space or anything. That would be goofy.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I'm hoping this doesn't go, because I know the original films did go there, and that the planets went to space and everything like that.
Oh, man, that'd be wild.
Right, so...
Summer 2026 release.
So I'll ask you guys this. Is the ending of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes satisfying? Is it a good ending? Is it a bad ending? What do you think?
Mediocre.
Middle of the road. Just kind of... It ends and I'm like, okay.
It ends and I'm not interested nor uninterested.
To me, my immediate reaction was like, I feel like I'll have a better say on the ending of this movie if a sequel comes out and sheds any more light on it, which is not really how I want to walk out of a movie if it's the first of a new trilogy. I don't really want to walk out of a second movie that I know will have a third and be like, well, let's see how the sequel shines light on this. You want to walk out of a movie as if it's a single experience.
For the conclusion of a solo film, I think it's good. It's passable. But for the end of, you know, the Caesar trilogy, so to speak, or this just, you know, continuing storyline, I think it falls short.
Nah, the only thing I really have left to say is, like, you know, kind of about the future of the franchise, kind of where I think it could be going. Theory, a little bit. And I think I know why there's so many references being drawn in now about the original movie, because I think they're kind of trying to build up to a finale very much like the original movie, or very much as a precursor-esque to the original movie. I don't know if they're going to try and recreate, remake, or reboot the 1968 film, because I think it's like, why touch that? Why go in the exact same direction?
I would say that the sequels to the 1968 film make connecting these franchises near impossible.
Exactly. But I feel like they might try to, because they've done that with movies in the past, where
Right.
they're like, well, we're gonna use, you know,
The first one.
all the rest are non-canon anymore. Okay, whatever. I think they might be building towards something like that. Maybe they just, they do this trilogy, and then the next one is like the original ones, spread out over 3 movies maybe. Because one of my theories is in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, we see a news about like astronauts going into space, which is initially an Easter egg, but of course when we're building a franchise, we go back on Easter eggs and say, well, we were doing this the whole time, guys.
The original film starts with these astronauts coming back to Earth. They didn't expect 700 years to pass while they were in space. Would it be interesting for the humans and the apes to be looking up at the ship that's coming back?
It's my theory about that, it's either astronauts coming back to Earth or some sort of wormhole or something like that, some sort of cosmic thing that will usher in a future story. May and Noah kind of go their separate ways to their separate tribes or cultures. And I think from here is where we get a separation of the both. And now that both kind of know where they stand, possibly building up to a big event that kind of caused the world to be the way it was in the 1968 film, with a big, you know, war that kind of ravages the earth between humans and apes. And then perhaps that happens over the course of, if we get more films after Kingdom, the next 2, and then maybe the 3 take place in a post version of that war.
Those would be movies that I would be much less enthusiastic about reviewing.
Absolutely. It goes back to what George Lucas said just the other day. There are no original films anymore, original ideas. To me, it's kind of crazy that this original series and franchise got 5 or 6 films, and now we are back here giving it 5 or 6 more? That alone is kind of crazy to me. I am enjoying the new films, though I didn't enjoy Kingdom as much. I want to go ahead and break us off into some technical aspects of the film that stood out to me. The cinematography is amazing. When you start out and Noah is trying to get the egg on the top, just following them swinging through the jungle with this dynamic camera movement really sucked me in right off the bat, kind of. And it eventually leads you up into a slower start, but these opening couple scenes are great. The great cinematography, the great music, and ultimately in my notes I have CGI written down, and this whole series is just kind of one of those CGI marvels. And even though we've said some rather harsh things about the film throughout the review, I think it's very important to also note that there are filmmakers and other members on this crew that are giving this their 110%. The people who brought the visuals to screen worked their asses off, and you can see that 100%. They saved this movie.
I think a testament to that is throughout this whole thing, any complaint we've made, never said any of it looked bad.
Absolutely.
Never said any graphic looked outdated or anything like that. Art direction,
wonderful.
CGI, wonderful.
One notable scene in the film was whenever Noah was fighting the primary silverback gorilla who was chasing him down for most of the film. I thought that fight was cooler than the fight with Proxima Caesar. The camera's moving through all of these, pipes and plumbing, as the water's starting to rise on the ship and the gorilla's breaking through it, and Noah's just kind of maneuvering around it like he does in the trees at the beginning of the film, and that looked really awesome.
That's a really good scene that looks good and also utilizes the two different types of apes. Noah is, I don't know exactly what kind of ape he is, maybe chimp, who knows. He's using his agility, while the silverback, of course, is more of a brute, so he's busting through stuff, and Noah's kind of using his agility to get around that, and I think it's, again, very well done.
We've talked a lot about this film. The things we liked, the things we didn't like. I think it's time to score it. I'm going to let Jackson start us off here. Give us your score.
Overall, I'm going to give this like a 6.8. You know what? No. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. Passing grade, room for improvement. That's my score.
I like that score.
I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I think I was sitting in like the 6.8 ballpark walking out of the theater, but after this conversation and then just kind of mulling over the details of the film, I'm going to give it a 6. I think the plot doesn't, chart any new course. We don't get any new interesting things in this already established world, but I can't knock the cinematography and the CGI and just all the technical aspects of the film.
I was a 7 walking out of the theater, and as I've thought about how this film doesn't move the franchise whatsoever, in fact, we've gone backwards a film from like War to Dawn, and even though I love the cinematography, I love the CG, I can't give that fact a pass. And it brings me down to a 6 as well. Like I said, enjoyed watching the movie. We'll probably go enjoy watching the sequel to this film. But it's ultimately some of the rougher edges that I can't necessarily get behind.
I think this is the first time I'm going to do it, but mid-review, I think I do have to lower my score to a 6 out of 10, because just thinking about it, I think part of my enjoyment is going to be very dependent on where sequels go from here.
And I'll be honest, I think what got me up to a 7 in the first place was going to see this in a movie theater. It does make your experience overall better.
A movie theater does have an illustrious effect on your view of a movie, I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hey, viewing experience can also play an effect.
An underlying principle that I use when scoring movies is that it needs to be able to stand on its own, and no matter how incredible the sequels might be, for me, this film's a 6 out of 10.
We hope you enjoyed Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, at least as much as we did. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. We've had a great time sitting here talking about it. We hope you'll enjoy some other episodes of Studio Cinema Saturday. We've done the Iron Claw, the Killer, Alien, the original Planet of the Apes. We hope you'll go watch some of that content. Check out Television Tuesday while you're at it. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Invincible. Everything you need is on the channel to this point. So what are you still doing watching this video? Click on to the next one. We'll see you there.